And we're back here on Public Affairs on Peach. Today's subject is cystic fibrosis and the upcoming Shamrockin' for a Cure event. And speaking of a cure, let's talk about some of those possibilities right now with Dr. Niall McCarty. He joins us this morning, Director of Emory plus Children's CF Center. Welcome, first of all.
Good to be with you.
Let's start with what we were touching on in the last segment, which is how does someone get this?
So CF is very much a genetic disease. It's not possible to get it except at birth. And it's what we call a recessive genetic disease, which means you have to have two copies of the faulty gene that encodes this protein called CFTR. So if we have two parents that are not carriers, they both have two copies for this, the gene that encodes CFTR, and they're both good. If both of them are carriers, they have one good copy, one bad copy. And when they have children, there's a 25% chance that the child will catch both of the bad copies of the gene, and they will develop this genetic disease.
Which is exactly how the parents we just spoke to can have two that do not have it and
That's
two
exactly
that do,
right.
Okay.
And carriers are almost completely healthy, so they may not know that they're carriers.
What is the current average lifespan for someone with CF?
The median predicted lifespan right now is about 41 years, which is great. We've really moved that number up a lot just during my career and during my lifetime. Unfortunately, we still lose a lot of our patients now before age 25. So it's, we promote this number of the median expected survival age of 41, but we still are losing people at pretty young ages. We lost a 2-year-old a few years ago.
Gosh, that's awful.
Right.
What is the complication that typically is the problem?
CF impacts lots of different organ systems. It impacts the intestines, it impacts the pancreas, impacts the lungs. And it used to be true that patients would die very early due to GI problems, due to inability to take on calories and put on weight. But nowadays, it's really the pulmonary disease that underlies the vast majority of the problem. If we're able to keep our patients alive long enough, then other organ systems come into play. There's a thing called CF-related diabetes that is a very weird form of diabetes that makes the lung disease worse.
There is now screening, am I right, even when they're in the womb?
There is. You can do amniocentesis and test to see if the developing child has mutated CFTR genes, but the good news is that newborn screening after birth for CF has been mandated across the country since January of 2010.
So how does that work? So right at birth,
right
is
at
that
birth.
the heel prick they
it's
do?
the heel prick,
okay.
and they do an
Having
initial...
just had twins.
Oh, good.
Very familiar with that. Okay.
They do an initial test that will say whether you might have CF, and then they follow that up with subsequent tests that really narrow it down to say yes or no. And this is really important because the sooner we can get hold of the patient and get them on the right nutritional care and educate the parents on what it takes to raise a CF kid, which is a lot of work, the better for the kid.
Before we get into the drugs that are currently out there, tell me about the nutrition side of things.
Nutrition, we've known for ages and ages, is really important for CF children, not just in the same way that nutrition is important for all children, but there's a very strange link between having appropriate nutritional status and having good pulmonary function. This is so important, in fact, that patients who have CF need to be cared for not just by a pulmonologist, but by a whole team of physicians and other caregivers, including nutritionists. This is why patients that get their care at an accredited, a CF Foundation accredited care center like ours, are much better off. They are seen by nutritionists, by social workers, by respiratory therapists, by pulmonologists, by GI docs, the whole complex care that you have to take care of a complex disease like CF.
So we've heard the average lifespan move about 10 years over the past couple decades.
Right.
What's out there right now in terms of drugs? What's on the horizon for 5-10 years down the line?
It is a very exciting time for CF. Just in the last few years, we've been able to show that we can identify compounds, small molecule compounds, that directly target the CFTR protein in its defective state. We've been developing symptom controls for CF for a long time, for decades and decades. Better anti-inflammatories, better antibiotics, et cetera, better nutritional supplements. But we've never, until just a few years ago, been able to say that we can target directly the protein that's defective in CF and try to fix it directly. A few years ago, a wonderful drug came out through research that started in academic labs and was picked up by pharmaceutical industry, sponsored by both the NIH and by the CF Foundation through grants that come from money as developed by shamrocking, where we were able to design, these people, not I, were able to design and identify drugs that directly target some forms of the CFTR protein that are defective. That drug works great. What we were able to do then is to take that drug and combine it with another drug that works on, that has a different mechanism of action and works on even more patients. So the excitement is just huge because now we know we can actually do this. We can target this defective protein directly.
And potentially reverse the
and
effects.
potentially reverse the defects, make it work like normal.
Wow, wouldn't that
or
be
at least
great?
close enough to normal to overcome the pulmonary symptoms and the GI symptoms and everything else. It's really exciting, and better drugs are right around the corner, so we're very excited.
Well, an exciting time in cystic fibrosis research. Thank you, Doctor, so much
My
for
pleasure.
joining us this morning. When we come back, we will take a look at one of the events that help raises money for cystic fibrosis to pay for some of those drugs.